You're in for a very, very special treat. While we reset the stage, let me tell you who you're about to see and get a chance to ask questions. So Jeremy Rifkin is the best-selling author of 20 books on the impact of scientific and technological changes on the economy, the workforce, society, and the environment. His books have been translated into more than 35 languages and are used in hundreds of universities, corporations, and government agencies around the world. In 2011, his book, The Third Industrial Revolution, captured the attention of the world. Mr. Rifkin's vision of sustainable post-carbon economic era has been endorsed by the European Union and the United Nations and embraced by world leaders including Chancellor Angela Merkel, President Francois Hollande, and Premier Li Keqiang of China. Jeremy Rifkin has been an advisor to the European Union and numerous heads of state and presidents for the past decade. He's the principal architect of European Union's Third Industrial Revolution Long-Term Economic Sustainability Plan, which was formally endorsed by the European Parliament in 2007 and is now being implemented in all EU member states. He has been a lecturer at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania since 1995, and he writes a monthly column that has appeared in the Los Angeles Times and The Guardian and numerous other newspapers and magazines around the world. He holds a degree in economics from the Wharton School and a degree in international affairs from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. So quite a mouthful, and trust me, I had to condense that. So it's my distinct pleasure, if we're ready, to introduce Mr. Jeremy Rifkin.
Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be here. Are you able to hear me okay? Okay, good.
Very good.
Well, again, it's a pleasure to be here. Let me start on a rather somber note. I hope it'll end up being a liberating reflection. You'll have to make the judgment call. GDP is slowing all over the world, everywhere. And the reason is productivity is declining all over the world, everywhere. The result is unemployment is very high, and especially among the millennial generation coming into the workforce. Now, let me stop for a moment. I do not see the audience here. I only see my picture on the frame. Can we make sure that I'm able to see the audience? Craig? Unfortunately, we were supposed to have a camera that would allow me to watch the audience.
Let's see if we can flip the camera around. I'm not sure if we have the setup.
There we go. We're good. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. All right.
All right.
Okay. We're good. And let's do the math. We've had two industrial revolutions in the 19th and 20th century. And I think we can arguably say that at this point in time, half the human race is doing much better than our ancestors did before the industrial era. I think it's also fair to say, however, that 40% of the human race that's making $2 a day or less is arguably no better off, or perhaps worse off, than their ancestors were 200 years ago. And here's the final equation at this juncture point in our industrial history. The 62 richest human beings in the world today, we could put them in a little section of this auditorium. Their combined wealth now equals the accumulated wealth of half the human beings living on Earth. That's 3.5 billion people. There's something so terribly dysfunctional about the way the human family is organizing our economic relationships on this Earth. And now this economic crisis is compounded by a much more profound crisis, an environmental crisis. We are now in real-time climate change. This is no longer a theory. It's no longer looming on the horizon. No longer at the front door. It's in the house. After 2 centuries of spewing massive amounts of CO2 and methane and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere of this little planet, we now can't get enough of the sun's heat off the Earth. And what's terrifying about climate change, it's never described, and I think if it were described, everyone in this room and everyone in the world would be justifiably frightened and motivated and driven to completely transform our way of life. Climate change changes the water cycles of the earth. That's what this is all about. This is the watery planet. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years, dependent on the cloud covers and the water cycles of the earth. For every 1 degree that the temperature goes up on this planet from industrial-induced CO2 emissions, the atmosphere is actually sucking up 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat is forcing that precipitation into the clouds, so we're getting more dramatic water events and more infrequent water events. More dramatic winter snows, more extreme spring flooding, more prolonged summer droughts and wildfires, more Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes. Our ecosystems cannot catch up to this runaway exponential curve. We have a water cycle of the earth that is completely ajar. The result is our ecosystems are collapsing in real time. And if you're a parent in this room today, or a grandparent, or a young millennial starting a family, I want you to listen to this. Our scientists now tell us we're in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth right now. We've had 5 extinction events over the last 450 million years on this planet, well before humans were here. And each time there was a dramatic shift in the chemistry of the planet very quickly, massive die-out. And each time 10 million years or more to recover life. We're now in the 6th extinction event. Our scientists now tell us that over the course of the next 7 decades, we will see unprecedented storms we've never seen in human history. We are going to see our major coastal cities underwater. We're going to see our infrastructure destroyed. These are the newest scientific reports out of the journals Nature, Science. Everyone's ignoring them. And we could lose over half the species of life on Earth by the time today's babies are my age. We may not make it. 99.5% of all the species of life that ever lived on this planet have come and they're gone. We're the youngest species, anatomically modern humans. We've been here about 200,000 years. There's no guarantee here. So what do? We have a structural economic crisis that is profound and long-term. And now that economic crisis has given rise to real-time climate change, affecting whether we're going to stay on this planet. We need a new economic vision for the world. It needs to be compelling. We need an economic game plan for that vision, and it has to be deployable quickly. It has to move as rapidly in the developing world as in the industrialized countries. We have to be off all carbon-based energies and fuels in less than 4 decades if we have any chance at all to mitigate the worst of this coming cataclysm, because we're already there. So we have to ask the question, how do the great economic paradigm shifts in history occur? If we know how they occur, we're going to get a roadmap here with the business people in this room in Poland, and we're going to get a compass to navigate quickly a new journey for the human race. There have been at least 7 great economic paradigm shifts in history. And interestingly, from an anthropological point of view, they share a common denominator. At a moment of time, 3 emerging technologies converged to create what we call in engineering a general-purpose technology platform. That is, a new infrastructure that fundamentally changes the way we manage, power, and move economic life. What are those 3 defining technologies? Number 1, new communication technologies to more efficiently manage our economic activity. Number 2, new sources of energy to more efficiently power our economic activity. And number 3, new modes of mobility to more efficiently move our economic activity. When communication revolutions join with new energy regimes, new modes of transportation logistics, it does change the way we manage power and move economic activity across the value chain. Let me give you two quick examples. First Industrial Revolution, 19th century. Second Industrial Revolution, 20th century. The Brits led us into the first Industrial Revolution with a revolution in communication, energy, and transport to manage power and move Britain. They took us from manual printing, the old Gutenberg print press, to steam power printing. Big leap forward in communication, cheap print material to manage economic life. Then the Brits laid out a telegraph system in the last half of that 19th century. The steam power printing and the telegraph then converged in Britain with a new source of energy, cheap coal from the hinterlands of Britain. Then the Brits harvested that coal with a new invention called the steam engine. Then they put the steam engine on rails, locomotives, railroads, hub-to-hub traffic, urban life, communication, energy, and transport, manage power and move Britain. First Industrial Revolution. Second Industrial Revolution in the United States. 20th century. Centralized electricity, and especially the telephone. We think the Internet's a big deal in this room today. The Internet is a big deal, but so is the telephone. Instant communication, speed of light across the planet. The telephone, later radio and television, those communication media converged in the U.S. with a new energy source, cheap Texas oil, powered by a new invention, the internal combustion engine. Then Henry Ford put everybody on the road. Cars, buses, and trucks, urban, suburban life, the rest is history. That second industrial revolution took the United States and the world through the 20th century, and it peaked July 2008. That's when Brent crude oil hit a record price of $147 a barrel on world markets, July 2008. And when that happened, the whole global economy shut down that month. How was the economic earthquake? The collapse of the financial market 60 days later was the aftershock. We are now in the long sunset of this second industrial revolution based on centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion, road, rail, water, and air transport. Why? The whole world relies on fossil fuels now in this industrial age. Our fertilizers, our pesticides, our construction materials, our pharmaceutical products, our synthetic fiber, our power, our transport, our heat and lights, all made out of fossil fuels. So when the price of those energies go over 90 a barrel, all the other prices start to go up. At around 115 a barrel, purchasing power slows. The economy goes down again. Oil prices go down to 50 a barrel, no activity. Then we try to regrow the inventories again. Oil prices go up, other prices go up. We shut down again at around 115, 120 a barrel. This is an end game. This isn't coming back. So let me share with you an anecdote. When Chancellor Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first few weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy and create jobs on her watch. The first thing I asked the new Chancellor when I got to Berlin, I said, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy when your businesses are plugged into an infrastructure of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion transport, and the productivity on that infrastructure peaked more than a decade ago? Peaked. Let me talk about productivity. Our economists cannot understand why productivity is declining for the last 20 years, with all these killer new products coming out in the smart startups in this room. Why is productivity declining? I'm going to share a dirty little secret with you that economists don't want to talk about. It's a little embarrassing. What is the nature of productivity? We used to believe in economics that there are two factors in productivity: more capital for better machines and better performing workers. But when Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize for economic growth theory in the mid-1980s, he let this dirty little secret out. He said, when we track every single year of the Industrial Revolution, these two factors, more capital, better machines, better workers, only accounts for about 14% of the productivity. So Robert Solow asked the big question, where did the other 86% of productivity come from? Don't know. Are you shocked that economists don't know? That should be key to the discipline. The reason they don't know, when economic theory was penned in the late 1700s, the vogue was Newton's physics. Everyone wanted to be scientific like Newton and borrow his metaphors because he had unlocked the secrets of the universe. The economists followed suit. So, for example, you know Newton's law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, Newton's law? Adam Smith borrowed the metaphor. Supply and demand, the invisible hand. For every movement on the supply side and the invisible hand, there's an equal and opposite reaction on the demand side. Newton's first law, body in motion stays in motion unless disrupted. Baptists say the French economists borrow the metaphor for his idea that supply stimulates demand, which generates supply, which stimulates demand unless disrupted. The only problem with basing all of our economic theory on Newton's physics has nothing to do with economics. Nothing. That's why the economists don't understand productivity. Economics is governed by the same laws that govern the universe, govern the solar system, govern the Earth's biosphere, and govern everything every business in this room is doing today. This is why you need to know this. It's key to the transformation you're about to undertake. Those two laws that govern the universe are the first and second laws of thermodynamics, the energy laws. The first law of energy says all the energy in the universe is constant. Since the Big Bang, no new energy has come on board, no energy is lost. But the second law says, while we haven't seen energy created or destroyed since the Big Bang, it always changes form, but only in one direction. From concentrated, the Big Bang, to dispersed through the galaxies. From hot to cooling off through the galaxies. From concentrated to dispersed, from order to disorder. Entropy is a measure of the unavailable energy that's still here, but it's cooled off, can't do any useful work. So here's what economics is all about. We take available energy out of nature. It can be a rare earth. You have 30 granules of rare earth in your smartphones there on you right now. They've been here since we blew off the sun. It can be a fossil fuel. It can be a metallic ore. All of that's energy that's bounded. We take that energy, material form, gas or liquid, out of the planet. And at every step, we have to move it, extract it. We have to ship it, store it. We have to produce goods and services out of it. We have to consume it and recycle it back to nature. Those are the value chains. At every step of conversion on these value chains, we have to embed energy into the good or service to move it to its next stage of development. But in the conversion, we lose some of the energy in the process. It doesn't get embedded. This is what we call in economics aggregate efficiency, the ratio of the potential work to the actual useful work that actually gets embedded in the product versus what's lost. Let me give you an example in nature. When a lion chases down an antelope in nature and kills it and devours it, only about 10 to 20% of the entire energy impounded in that antelope gets embedded into the lion. The rest is heat loss in the conversion. That's its aggregate efficiency. This is economics. It doesn't differ between nature and the economy. So what does this have to do with my conversation with the Chancellor of Germany 10 years ago? She's a physicist, and I said to her, look, the United States started the Second Industrial Revolution in 1903 at 3% aggregate efficiency, the ratio of potentially useful work in every conversion. We lost 97% of everything we were extracting from nature across the value chains. By 1990s, the U.S. got up to about almost 14% aggregate efficiency. Germany got up to almost 18.5% aggregate efficiency 10 years later. Japan led the world at 20% aggregate efficiency. Nothing's changed. Those are ceilings. Nothing's changed. What I'm telling you here is, I said to the Chancellor, you can have market reforms, you can have labor reforms, you can have fiscal reforms, you can have monetary reforms, all of that's good, and you can incentivize 1 million Steve Jobs. Won't make a damn bit of difference. As long as your businesses are plugged into a second industrial revolution infrastructure, centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion transport to manage power and move Germany, and you peaked in your aggregate efficiency 10, 15 years ago. Why is this important? A new generation of economists has gone back and tracked the Industrial Revolution with three factors: better machines, better workers, aggregate efficiency. And when they put that third factor into the equation, it accounts for most of the rest of growth and productivity. Every engineer in this room today could have told you that. Every chemist in the room today could have told you that. Every architect and engineer in the room today could have told you that, because you all have to study the laws of thermodynamics as your basic language before you conduct your discipline. Now, I teach in the oldest business school in the world, the Wharton School. Not a single business school in the world requires that our economists be trained in the language of thermodynamics that manages economic activity. That's why we don't understand the situation. So on this first day with the Chancellor, I outlined a third industrial revolution, a new convergence of communication, energy, and transport to manage power and move Germany. At the end of the day, the Chancellor turned to me. She said, "Mr. Rifkin, we will have this third industrial revolution for Germany." I'll report back a few minutes from now on where we've done, what we've done in the last 10 years in Germany, and now what we're going to be doing in the EU. We have a new convergence of communication, energy, and transport. This is a digital revolution. Now, let me be clear. The first industrial revolution was steam power. The second industrial revolution in the 20th century was analog electricity. The third industrial revolution is digital. There is no, I hate to say this to your council, there is no fourth industrial revolution. That's kind of business hype by some companies in Germany and elsewhere, but there is none. And maybe if we got to quantum mechanics, there'd be a fourth. But this is the digital revolution. Here's what's happening. The communication internet, which is digital, is matured. It's been 25 years since the World Wide Web. Now this digital communication internet to manage economic activity is just now converging with a digitalized renewable energy internet to power economic activity. And that internet in turn is converging with a digital, automated, GPS, and soon completely driverless road, rail, water, and air transport internet to move economic activity. Three internets: communication, energy, and transport internet, manage power and move economic life. These three internets are one internet now, and they ride on top of a platform called the Internet of Things. We are placing sensors in all the devices, all our machines, so they can talk to each other and talk to us. We have billions of sensors now in the agricultural fields, monitoring the growth of crops, sensors in the factories, real-time monitoring of economic data, sensors in the smart homes, smart vehicles, smart businesses, smart roads, warehouses, and they are tracking economic activity in real time. By 2030, we will have ubiquitous interconnectivity. We are essentially creating a technological prothesis of the nervous system of the human race, a brain, a global brain out there that can manage power and move our value chains. On the upside, this is a big leap forward for humanity. We now are beginning to connect the human race on this global brain so that we can directly engage each other and eliminate many of the middlemen, the vertically integrated organizations and the middlemen that were the referees. We can now directly engage in economic life as one extended human family. This is the vast potential democratization of the entrepreneurial spirit, social entrepreneurialism. On the other hand, the moment we think about how exciting this is, we're finally connecting the human race in real time, we're chilled by the prospect because the dark net immediately is in front of us. Everybody interconnected in 2030. How do we deal with network neutrality? How do we ensure governments don't purloin this global brain for their own political ends? How do we ensure that big companies don't monopolize this global brain for commercial greed? How do we ensure privacy when everyone's connected? How do we guarantee data security? How do we prevent cybercrime and cyber terrorism that can break down and disrupt the system? How do we build resilience into the networks? These dark issues in the dark net are as imposing as the bright future. But let me say, we will not get to the promised land unless we deal with all the potential disruptions that may occur along the line. But let's assume for the sake of this afternoon, I deal with this much more in depth in the book, Zero Marginal Cost Society. So I'm not going to deal with that now. Here's the advantage of this new Internet of Things, third industrial revolution. Everybody in this room today, all the businesses, you have value chains. Whether you're a small business, a large business, a cooperative, or nonprofit, every day you are somehow directly or indirectly taking stuff out of nature and moving it and storing it and shipping it and producing things out of it and consuming it and recycling it. What this means is you can go up now on this Internet of Things platform that's now emerging for communication, energy, and transport and have a transparent picture of the entire economic activity flowing through the world. If it's open, network neutral, even big companies didn't have this data before. This is extraordinary because this evens the playing field. It's a lateralization of economic opportunity. So let's say you're a small business here in Poland or a large company. You can go up on this Internet of Things platform, it's already starting, and you can, with very cheap mobile technology, you can take your value chain of big data and take it out of the rest of the noise. You can literally extract your big data on the value chain you care about to manage, power, and move your business and remove it from the rest of the data going through. And then here's what you can do. You can mine your own big data and with your own analytics. Then you can create your own algorithms and apps. So you can dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency at every step of conversion on your value chain. And by doing so, dramatically spike your productivity. Dramatically reduce your ecological footprint because you're getting more out of less. And dramatically reduce your marginal cost. Some of your marginal cost will get very low, which means in the capitalist market, you'll have to move from producing the goods to managing the services. And you'll have to rely on being involved in blockchain networks that allow you to have volume rather than make it on each individual product line. Some of the marginal costs are already approaching zero, which is the title of the new book, The Zero Marginal Cost Society. And when the marginal costs from digitalization approach zero, it gives rise to the sharing economy. What is the sharing economy we're all talking about? Capitalism's given birth to a progeny, a little baby. We didn't see it coming. And this little sharing economy is being nourished alongside its capitalist parent. And like any parent-child relationship, capitalism has to figure out what to do with this baby, how to nurture it, find a way to help it create its own identity, its own presence in the world. But if you're parents, you know that sometimes parents want the child to be a direct reflection of the parent. Sometimes the child doesn't want that. In this case, we're seeing a tug-of-war between the parent and child, but I would say that we're seeing the birth of a new economic system in the world. The sharing economy is not just the next step of capitalism. It's the birth of the first new economic system since capitalism and socialism in the 19th century. It's a remarkable historical event. It's muddy. It's partially blurred with capitalism. Capitalism isn't going to go away. But it's not going to be the primary exclusive arbiter of economic life in the next 20 years. Already, we have a new category. We still have sellers and buyers. We still have owners and workers. But we have a new category, prosumers. There are 3 billion people now on the Internet, now the Internet of Things. And they are prosumers. At any given time, they're producing and sharing all sorts of goods and services for each other, open source, for free, beyond profit, in the sharing economy. Right now, there are young people in this audience. Part of the day, you're in the capitalist market. Margins are still there. They will be for many products and services. You're selling, you're buying, you're making money on the margins. But part of the day, you're sharing all sorts of virtual goods with each other for free beyond the market. The zero marginal cost society has already completely disrupted the first of the 3 technology revolutions that we need for this new era, and that's the communication revolution. So let's see what it's done there. Then we can see in this room how it's going to impact energy, transport, logistics, 3D printing, and everything else. We have millions of young people right now as I speak to you, and they're up there on the Internet of Things, and they are producing their own music with cheap digital technology that's studio quality. I mean, what does it cost to get a little recorder with studio quality? And then whether you send that music to one person or 1 billion people on the web, same cost, zero marginal cost. All you need is a service provider. Keep the power up. We have young people producing their own YouTube videos with their smartphones. They just whip out the smartphone. It doesn't cost them much for a phone. Then they put it up on the web, it goes viral. Zero marginal cost. We have young people producing their own social media news blogs. Zero marginal cost. We have young people contributing to Wikipedia. Now, this is the most, Jimmy Wales created the most improbable invention in history. We now have millions and millions of people who are constructing the knowledge of the world on a nonprofit website, the 6th largest in the world, for free. And we democratize knowledge in 20 years. No more experts only. And the accuracy with the crowdsourcing is precise. All free. We have 6 million college students taking massive open online college courses taught by the best professors, best universities. They're getting college credits. There's a large dropout rate. They'll have to blend it with physical courses, but it's not going to go away. Entire industries have been disrupted since Napster in the virtual world. The music industry has shrunk. Television has declined. Newspapers and magazines have gone out of business. Book publishing has suffered. But thousands of new businesses have emerged, not just Facebook and Amazon and Google and Twitter. In this room and around the world, there are thousands of enterprises, some nonprofit, some profit. They're creating the platforms, the apps, the connectivity. They're using the big data and mining the analytics for the algorithms. It's a revolution. We thought there'd be a firewall. And while the virtual world would be impacted by digitalization, communication, it wouldn't go over the firewall to the physical world. What I'm saying in the Zero Marginal Cost Society in the book, firewall has been destroyed with the Internet of Things. Gone. We now have millions of people now, especially in Europe, now in China it's starting, who are producing their own solar and wind electricity at near zero marginal cost. And with the car sharing, which is quickly going to move to driverless electric and fuel cell transport, we're heading toward very low, and drones, very low to near zero marginal cost transport, which sets up the infrastructure for 3D printing and everything else. Let me go back to Germany. What's happened in Germany since that first conversation with the Chancellor? We now have 32% of all the electricity in Germany is solar and wind right now. Zero marginal cost. It'll be 35% by 2020. It'll be, and I want you to listen to this in Poland, it'll be 100% renewable energy by 2040. Zero marginal cost businesses. The fixed cost of these renewable energies are on an exponential curve, just like computers. Now, this is important. Computers used to cost millions of dollars. I'm 71 years old. When I was a little kid, computers cost millions of dollars. And the chairman of IBM said we'd need 5 computers for the world. That was his projection. We'd need 5 computers. We did not anticipate Moore's Law on the Intel chip. The engineers were able to double the capacity on that Intel chip and half the cost every 2 years. Now, China has a smartphone for $25 with more computing power and sent our astronauts to the moon. Everyone's going to be connected, even at $2 a day. What's interesting about the fixed cost of solar and wind, they're on a similar exponential curve to computers. And in the public discussion in Poland, I'm just going to tell you, that's not much in the discussion. It is in Germany. A solar watt used to cost $78 to generate 1 solar watt in 1978. $78 a watt. It's 50 cents a watt this morning. It's 35 cents a watt in 15 months from now. And in my global group, which we have a global group that I chair of construction, real estate, transport, logistics, power companies, our power companies are right now in Europe and America buying long-term 20-year contracts for solar and wind electricity, 4 cents a kilowatt hour, because we know the exponential curves. It is over for fossil fuel and nuclear. But what hasn't been awakened in the public arena, and this is true in Poland, I'd say, is the big issue going on in the power companies now. They understand that it's over. And what's happening behind the scenes, because I work with them every week, is stranded assets. Citigroup just said, put out a projection that we have $100 trillion in stranded assets now in the fossil fuel and nuclear industry. This is going to make the subprime mortgage look like the small leagues. $100 trillion in stranded assets because they can't compete with these exponential curves. So what does this mean? Once you pay the fixed cost, these technologies are going to be as cheap as your cell phones. They're putting solar in paint, in glass, in facades, small wind. All of this technology will be available to everyone in 25 years. Millions of people, hundreds of millions of people. The human race is going to create their own electricity and cooperate. But the issue is once you pay for the fixed cost, the marginal cost of this energy right now in Germany for 1/3 of the electricity powering that country, near zero. The sun has not sent us a bill. The wind has not invoiced us. Free. Right now. So imagine what happens when German businesses can plug in to a communication internet that then allows us to digitalize the electricity grid and make it into an energy internet. And in every single conversion on their value chains, those businesses are using energy that's at near zero marginal cost. How about that for an increase in productivity and efficiency and a reduction in ecological footprint at very low marginal cost? If you're in a country that's still relying on coal and oil and natural gas, you're out of the game. You're out of the game. What's interesting is who's producing this energy in Germany. There are 4 major power companies there, Vattenfall, EnBW, RWE, and E.ON. We thought they were invincible 10 years ago. But what's happened to them is what happened to the music industry and newspapers and magazines and book publishing and television. Small players came together all over Germany, farmers and small businesses and neighborhood associations and cooperatives. They created electricity cooperatives. They all went to the banks to get loans. The government didn't need to do this. The banks gave them the loans because they knew they'd pay back on the energy they're generating. Can't lose on the loans. They're producing all the new electricity. This is power to the people. Literally and figuratively, they're producing all the power. The big 4 power companies are producing less than 7%, and they're now acknowledging they can't do it. They were the most efficient mechanisms for organizing centralized energies. They did a good job, which required vertical integration. But the new energies are laterally scaled. You have to collect the sun everywhere and the wind everywhere and the geothermal heat everywhere. It requires cooperatives that come together, millions of small players connected in blockchains with their apps. It's a revolution. Does this mean this is the end of the energy companies? No, not necessarily, but they have to change their business model quickly. So about 5 years ago, the chairman of E.ON asked if their chairman could debate with me. We did it. And I laid out a new business model. I said, you're not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow morning. This is a 30-year shift, so you have to be in 2 smart business portfolios. You have to be in a sunset portfolio that's still up and running for the second industrial revolution for power, but you have to be in a sunrise third industrial revolution business model to make the succession over 30 years. And I said, in the new business model, you at E.ON will make more money by selling less electricity. Mr. Tyson said, how do we do that? I said, you will set up partnerships with thousands of enterprises. You will help manage the energy flows on their energy internet, on their value chain. You will help them with their big data. You will help them with their analytics on their energy flows, homes, offices, factories. You will help them increase their aggregate efficiency at every step of their conversion on their value chains. You will help them with their productivity, and as their productivity goes up, they'll share their productivity gains back with the power companies. We call this performance contracts. It's now happening. And 5 years ago, the chairman of E.ON said, we're not going to do this, Mr. Rifkin. He did it last year. They sold off their fossil fuel and nuclear divisions to an independent operation company, and they're managing energy services. My global group, we're now doing test regions. We are deploying in all of northern industrial France. We're now in Rotterdam to The Hague. We're in all of Luxembourg, financial capitals and others. And I have to say, EDF has joined us in France. They're helping us lay out the infrastructure, and so is RWE. They're smart business. You can't stay in the past. You got to move to the future. And it's not just Europe. To my great surprise, when President Xi and Premier Li came in office, Premier Li of China announced that he had publicly, in his biography, that he had read my book, The Third Industrial Revolution. I was quite pleased. And he said to the central government, we will now take the themes that I'm laying out to you today, and he said, we will now move these themes in China. Mindful that they lost the first industrial revolution, they were colonized. They came into the second industrial revolution the last 10 years. They don't want to lose out on the third. They want to be part of the game. To show you how fast they move, I've now been shuttling back and forth. I'm working both with the European leadership and now the Chinese leadership to show you how fast they move, and it was quite amazing to me. After my first visit, 11 weeks later, the chairman of the state electricity grid of China, which is the largest electricity grid in the world, announced an $82 billion 4-year commitment, starting now, to completely digitalize the electricity grid of China. So that millions of Chinese people can produce their own solar and wind locally, off-grid, on-grid, send it back to the grid, the energy internet. It's a revolution. So, the coming together of the communication internet with the energy internet makes possible the digitalized, automated, GPS, driverless road, rail, water, and air internet. Purchasing automobiles was the centerpiece of the second industrial revolution. That's how we built the global economy, buying automobiles. But here's the problem. I just saw a young millennial, I think, here in the room. I can see you there. The young people don't want to own automobiles again. That's grandma and grandpa owning 2 automobiles, sitting in the driveway. They wax them every 3 weeks. They're not being used. Or at the office, 90% of the day, they're not being used. The young people do not want ownership of vehicles in markets. They want access to mobility in networks. We're moving from ownership to access, from markets to networks, from market to social capital. And I will tell you, with car sharing, these, beginning with the millennials, and then their children and their grandchildren, they're never going to own cars again. Not tomorrow morning, but this is an exponential curve over 3 generations. For every car shared, 15 cars are being eliminated. Larry Burns is the former executive vice president of General Motors, until 5 years ago. He just did a study of Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's a University of Michigan professor. And he said, we can eliminate with the transport internet right now, even though it's nascent. He took a middle-sized city, Ann Arbor, Michigan. He said, we can eliminate 80% of the vehicles in this city right now with car sharing on these digital internet websites. Now let's extrapolate his study. We have 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks in the world today. They're choking us in traffic, and they're the number 3 cause of global warming emissions. Number 1 is buildings. But in Germany and now in these other places we're retrofitting a lot. Germany, we've retrofitted 2 million buildings, totally retrofitted, and turned them into micro power plants. By the way, does anyone in the room know what the number 2 cause of climate change from CO2 emissions is? And methane. Number 1 is buildings. We always talk about it. Got to get them more efficient. Number 3 is transport. Got to change it. No one ever talks about number 2. The number 2 cause of global warming emissions is beef production and beef consumption, and the methane and the nitrous oxide and the CO2. And even environmentalists don't want to talk about it for fear that somebody may be upset because they have to change their dietary habits to save the human race and the planet. If we're not willing to address the impact that 1.3 billion cows have, both with the manure and the nitrous oxide and the methane, we're lost. And I'm sure this debate hasn't even started in Poland. I'm sure of it. But the number 3 cause, transport, global warming emissions. So if Larry Burns is right, we're going to eliminate 80% of the vehicles in the next 3 generations with car sharing. The other 200 million vehicles, they're going to be electric. In China, I'm working with China on the new 5-year plan. We're going to put out 5 million electric cars in the next 5 years. Just started. So the remaining 200 million vehicles in the world, we're going to eliminate 80% of them, the billion. They're going to be electric. They're going to be fuel cell. They're going to be operated by near zero marginal cost renewable energy. They're going to be 3D printed with recycled composite materials at a low marginal cost. They're going to be driverless. Road, rail, water, and air. China just came to the Las Vegas Electronics Fair, and they have an air drone right now. It picks you up and delivers you. No one there. All very low cost. This is a revolution. Does this mean it's the end of the transport industry? No, but they have to change their business model. I joined Daimler Trucks about 2 months ago. Daimler, of course, is, I always watch Daimler because Daimler created the second industrial revolution with the internal combustion engine, Daimler. And so Daimler asked me to join them to announce a new business. They're still going to sell millions of trucks. That's not going to stop tomorrow morning. There's going to be millions of trucks. This is over 30 years, not tomorrow morning. It's not either or tomorrow. It's getting from A to B over 3 decades. But they asked me to lay out the narrative I'm laying out to you. We had 350 journalists in the room. And then the chairman of Daimler Trucks announced that they are in a new business. They're still selling trucks, but they are now in the logistics internet. And he announced that they have equipped 300,000 trucks with sensors. These are mobile big data labs right now across Europe. And these sensors are monitoring traffic, weather conditions, warehouse availability, all the things you would need. So if you're a small or large business, you can use their analytics, use their algorithms with their apps, and dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency and productivity and reduce your marginal cost across your value chain on the logistics side. Then they took a helicopter feed live on the German expressways, dimmed the audience lights, and the journalists saw something that was spectacular. They went into the 3 cabs of trucks, Daimler Trucks, and the truck drivers are waving at everyone in the room. And the chairman of Daimler Trucks said to the drivers, take your hands off the wheels. Take your hands off the pedal, your foot off the pedal. And all of a sudden, the drivers were now software analysts. They were no longer drivers. They were monitoring the data. The trucks platooned into a train automatically, driverless, big data, mobile data centers crossing Europe. It's a revolution. So where does this head us in Europe? As we began to think about it, we have to integrate this infrastructure of communication, energy, and transport to manage power and move the value chains, digital revolution across every region. We have a new journey in Europe. When President Juncker and the new commission came in, I wrote a memorandum for Mr. Juncker and the team on how do we move to digital Europe, a single integrated commercial space for 500 million people in the Union and 500 million people in our partnership regions. That's the largest market in the world. And the new plan is called Smart Europe, Digital Europe, to bring together communication, energy, and transport, to have the regions across Europe lay out this infrastructure and customize it to each region and transborder. All open for everyone's value chains. The question then was, how do we pay for it? Well, that was an easy question to answer. The money's all there. We don't need any new money. The question is, what are we doing with the money we're already using? For example, in the European Union, in 2012, we spent $741 billion U.S. equivalent dollars on infrastructure in a lousy recession year, 2012. That's just 1 year. Public-private investment, all regions in Europe, $741 billion. The problem is not the money, it's where we spend it on. We spend it on the second industrial revolution. You did it in Poland, we all did it. Centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion transport, and we peaked on the productivity in that platform 15 years ago. We can't get any new productivity, new business models, new employment out of that platform. So I said we need to reprioritize our investments. We did it. We had a meeting last year. I laid out this narrative. President Hoyer was there, President of the EIB. Chancellor Merkel hosted with Mr. Juncker. And now the new priorities, Poland. If you're a region in Poland and you want EU monies, every region, with your local businesses, and you want to lay out a map to move to this infrastructure and create the new businesses, the new priorities to get that money from the EU is digital communication, digital energy, digital transport, digital education for the workforce, and healthcare, digital healthcare. So we need to think new, and every region has to now begin to create a plan with local businesses, with the Chamber of Commerce, with the civil society, the neighborhoods, and local regional governments, like we're doing in northern France, like we're doing in Rotterdam to The Hague, like we're doing in Luxembourg, tomorrow morning. Every business in this room will be engaged, every industry. We need telecom, cable, ICT, consumer electronics, transport and logistics, construction, infofacturing, life sciences. They all have to be there. And it creates lots of jobs, millions of jobs in the short run to create this smart economy. By 2050, it'll run with small supervisory workforces, for sure, automated. And then the jobs are going to be moving into the social economy, the nonprofit sector, fees for services. But in the short run, two generations, lots of jobs. In Poland, we would have to take the entire energy infrastructure of Poland, which is fossil fuel or nuclear, whatever, and transform it to distributed renewable energies. We have to retrofit every single home, office, and factory in Poland, like it's happening in Germany. Because you can't put the new energy technologies on these buildings until you retrofit them. That is true generations for the construction industry and real estate with energy service companies paid back by performance contracting. You can do it tomorrow morning. Northern Industrial France is doing it right now in the third year. Then we have to take all of these new energy technologies, solar, wind, geothermal, manufacture them and install them. Robots aren't going to do that. AI isn't going to do that. Robots aren't going to put the insulation in the buildings, and they're not going to put the renewable energies in there and the monitoring equipment. Then we have to take the electricity grid of Poland and move it from servo-mechanical and dumb to digital and smart. Who's going to lay down the new underground cable? Who's going to put in the smart meters and the digital technology to manage the electricity on the grid? Robots aren't going to do that. AI is not going to do that. We have to take the whole transportation infrastructure of Poland and move it from dumb to smart road, rail, water, and air. Who's going to install the thousands of charging stations, fuel cell outlets? What you have to reimagine is that every building in Poland, home, office, and factory, is not just a habitat anymore. They are the nodes for the Internet of Things. Be clear. These are the nodes for the Internet of Things platform. The buildings are retrofitted, and then they become the big data centers, the micro power plants to generate energy around the sites. They become the charging stations for the transport hubs. Those homes, offices, factories, and infrastructure are the nodes that laterally connect. That's the Internet of Things platform to manage power and move your communication, energy, and transport across Poland. This can be done tomorrow morning. So what I would say is this. I don't think it's just about the technologies. I'm not a fatalist about technology. I think that technology just enables us. I think in this room, you have all the expertise in this room today. You are in Poland, the new businesses, the startups, the traditional businesses. You're moving to digital third industrial revolution. You have the sentences, now you need the narrative. Because if you don't have the narrative, you'll end up with pilot projects. You'll end up with small pilot projects that go nowhere. You have to, in each region of Poland, lay out this whole infrastructure with public and private engagement. Then your businesses plug into it and they create the new opportunities. All right? But you need more than just the technology and the economics. We need to change the way we think. We need a new shift in consciousness. And what I'm seeing that's promising among the younger millennial generation in Poland and around the world is they're beginning to have a very different idea about three major categories that govern consciousness. Our notion of freedom, our notion of power, our notion of community. I grew up in a world where we thought of freedom as the right to be autonomous, independent, self-sufficient, not beholden to others. To be free is to be an island to ourselves. Freedom is exclusivity. That's the Enlightenment view. But for the young millennials in Poland, if you check it out, who grew up on the Internet, they have a very different idea about freedom. For them, to be free is to flourish. But one doesn't flourish if one is autonomous, an island to oneself, not beholden to others. For them, freedom is directly proportional to the networks they're in. The more engaged they are with others, the more they can share their talents open source to benefit the networks, the more the networks benefit them. So for them, freedom is not exclusivity, it's inclusivity, it's access, it's engagement in network after network. Different idea about freedom. Probably have to change the constitutions in most countries. They also think differently about power. I grew up in a world that saw power as a pyramid. The one to the many. That's what power is. But if you grow up on the Internet and the Internet of Things, when everything is laterally scaled, not vertically integrated, power is directly proportional to the value of the networks you're in. Everybody benefits each other. It's open source. That's just a different idea about power. And finally, let me end with this, community. I grew up in a post-Westphalian world, the nation state. We began to believe that each human being is a citizen of a nation, and we are each a sovereign to ourselves, a sovereign, like a king. Each of us are a king. And each individual citizen is a sovereign, competes with other individuals for scarce resources in the marketplace. Zero-sum game. Nation states are sovereign. They represent the individual citizens. They compete with other nation states, both in the marketplace and the battlefield, for scarce resources in a zero-sum game. Can anyone here in this room tell me how we will come together as a human family, connect on an interplanetary basis, address climate change, and create a more sustainable society with that worldview? Anybody? We have young people now that are moving to a new form of consciousness, biosphere consciousness. They grew up digital. They're Skyping in global classrooms. 1.2 billion kids are on Facebook. It's the largest fictional family in history. And we've got 13-year-olds coming home, even in Poland and the U.S. and elsewhere, and they're saying to their parents, why does Dad use so much water while he's shaving, wasting the water and the energy we use to move the water? Why is the television on? No one's used that TV in 3 weeks. Why do we have 2 cars? Why not car share one? And the one I particularly like, which I'll share with you, we have young teenagers coming home and asking where the piece of beef came from on the plate. And they're asking, did that piece of beef come from a rainforest? Did they have to destroy those trees for 3 inches of topsoil to graze 1 cow for 3 years for their piece of beef? And the kids are smart enough to know if those trees are destroyed for the topsoil to graze their beef, there's rare animal and plant life that only live in that tree canopy extinct. And if the trees aren't there anymore, they can't absorb CO2 from industrial emissions, which means the temperature of the planet goes up. Some farmer can't feed her children because she has spring floods and summer droughts and wildfires because that child's eating a piece of beef. The kids are learning ecological footprint. They're learning that everything we do thermodynamically absolutely impacts every other human, every other creature, all the ecosystems of this biosphere. They're beginning to understand that the biosphere, that little 19 kilometers from the stratosphere to the ocean, chemicals and life interact. That's our indivisible community. We don't give up our national ties. We don't give up our religious ties. We don't give up our blood ties, but we're part of an indivisible biosphere. These children are learning that is our future. So with all the startups in this room, and with all the traditional businesses, in this one room, you have the talent and the expertise, and you have the motivation to move Poland forward. We have to move Europe forward. We have to move China forward. We have to move America forward in the world. So what I'm saying is, take all of that expertise in this room, find ways at the national level in Poland and in the regions to begin working with government at every level, business community at each level, the chambers of commerce, the civil society, churches, and began to build out this infrastructure so we can hopefully move off a carbon-based civilization, address climate change. Maybe we have a chance to at least partially reflourish the planet. And if I would say to the parents in this room, if not you, when? Should be tomorrow morning. Poland can do this. It is one of the most industrially motivated countries in the world. It's been a champion in Eastern Europe. It's been a big player with Germany. It's a driving force, and it should be right at the head of the pack in leading us into smart digital Europe over the next 20 years with lots of business opportunities, but also bringing us into a more humane and just and democratic world. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. A little bit startling beginning, but an inspiring end. While we get microphones and some questions from the audience, it's phenomenal you've been able to get the European Union's attention and China's attention to pursue some of these changes and fixes to the economies and industries. While we know in the U.S., most of the lawmakers are in fact professional lawmakers, politicians, lawyers, not scientists or economists, and it's an inefficient system. So how would you get through to the most powerful economy in the world, in the United States, the same way you were able to activate European lawmakers? What will it take?
We're going to surround the United States. That's the only way to do it. Let me say that I spent my first 30 years in the U.S. on these issues since 1970s. Then I went over the pond because I realized Europe was the place that's going to move this forward, and now China. But let me say California, Washington, Oregon State, they're on the right track. My global group did Southern Texas, from San Antonio to Austin. They're on the right track. The rest of the country is moribund. It's in the second industrial revolution. Here's the problem. we've lost the concept of how the paradigm shifts occur in America. So you're always very attracted to America because you see Silicon Valley. But what Silicon Valley is missing is that the great paradigm shifts are infrastructure shifts. Those are public goods. They require public monies and government engagement with private industry and with communities to build out infrastructure. So in my country, half the country has no understanding that the businesses are successful because they plugged into infrastructures that are public goods that are paid for by tax money. They don't want tax money to use any of it. So when you ask them, who do you think created the public schools so we could train the workforce? How did we lay out the interstate highways? Do you think businesses are going to lay out an interstate highway system coast to coast, public domain, no traffic lights? I asked them, who do you think subsidized the telephone coming across the country? Or putting in the electricity grids? It's all government with industry. So what I'm saying here is that our country's lost the idea that government at every level and industry have to work together. This is our death knell. Europe understands the social market economy, and most of the world does. So despite the fact that there are killer products coming out of Silicon Valley, it's meaningless unless the digital revolution begins by the businesses laying out the infrastructure, and that's where you're going to create your early adoption and economies of scale. Every business in this room, you're going to create your economies of scale by early adoption by helping lay out infrastructure that's public and private investment. And if you don't do it, you're just going to lose all that EU money, leverage against private equity, because it's coming. So either be an early starter and move it or not. But in the U.S., I'm always guardedly hopeful because once we get the story, America moves fast. We will spend our last dime on a future story. We're not there. But I think the digital generation is. So I think demographics is on our side, and what I would say is we've lost 15 years with this ridiculous shale gas. We knew it was a bubble. We knew the fossil fuel industry would knock it out by moving oil down to 50 a barrel. It's over. There's no more talk about energy independence. It's all bankrupt. Shale gas is gone. Tar sands is gone. We lost 10 years. And we built all of this infrastructure with natural gas-fired power plants, and it's all stranded assets. So Poland needs to get on with moving beyond fossil fuels, and it's got to start moving with smart digital industries across transport, logistics, ICT, electronics, all the industries, and start moving this forward thoughtfully.
So, do we have microphones and some questions? Raise your hands. I'm guessing Burton will have a question. So, Dr. Burton Lee from Stanford University. Do we have a microphone?
Thank you, Jeremy. Yes, Stanford Engineering School. I work extensively in Europe at the institutional level, meaning companies, mid-sized, family-owned corporates, but also universities. And I see huge difficulties in making culture changes inside these organizations. We don't have the tools to do this. This is something that the business schools globally, the sociologists are not really studying, how to do culture change in an organized fashion to accelerate this. So while the ideas are there for moving us to new technical infrastructure, the infrastructure for moving our institutions is not there. Other than getting to a few decision makers, ultimately a lot of the stuff gets stuck in the actual implementation phase. Yeah. When you bring this down to corporates, family-owned companies, mid-sized, to rectors, universities, what are your thoughts? Have you seen any organized way to accelerate the institutional culture change in your work in Europe, China, or the U.S.?
You hit the real issue. What we're learning is this has to come from the localities. It can't come top-down. Now, at the national and continental level in the EU, codes, regulations, standards, incentives, fine. But the actual infrastructure comes in at the regional level. So we've now gone from theory to practice. We're in 3 areas now. We're in northern industrial France, 3rd year of deployment, and now Rotterdam to The Hague and Luxembourg. And we're inviting delegations that are coming in from around the world to watch this. It's a learning curve. What's happened is, for northern industrial France, the oldest industrial region of France, the mining region, it was a rust belt. They said, let's do something. And I said, it has to be collaborative. You have your experts, you have your businesses, you have your neighborhood associations, you have your school systems. So we are in our 3rd year. First year, we created an economic plan together. They brought thousands of people together. They took 3,000 businesses, went through seminars through the Chamber of Commerce on this transformation in 18 months. Then they moved all 7 universities in a consortium to change the entire curriculum, led by Catholic University. Then they brought the 200 high schools together, got an 850 million euro credit from the EU to transform them into third industrial revolution infrastructures as labs. Then we began to lay out together, we brought in our global team of engineering institutions, and you know a lot of them, the big global companies, Navigant and DNGVL and Fraunhofer and others. But they did the plan. They actually set up the committees. Then it was theirs. It was their learning curve. So we're doing the same thing now in these other areas, Rotterdam, The Hague, and Luxembourg, and we would invite you, come and see it, sit down with folks there, look at our mistakes, look at the challenges, but they're on fire because now they're not waiting for anyone else. They realize these regions, they're global, and they can do business global. And if they got it, people will come. So I think talk is cheap. Action takes a while, but if you're motivated at the local level and engaged, I'm going to Rotterdam to The Hague next week for our midterm seminar on our plan, and there are thousands of people engaged in this plan already across the universities, the think tanks, the government, the local businesses, the school system. That's the only way to do it. You can't do it any other way.
All right, do we have another question? I think we're running short on time. We have a question in the back there. While we get a mic up there, hopefully.
I already have a mic.
Oh, we have one there. Okay,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Rifkin. My name is Sebastian Starzyński. I came here especially for your speech, honestly. I've read your book, Zero Marginal Cost Society, and I have a question because you put some issues which are really important for the world, like the capitalist crisis, the ecological crisis, and so on. You just told about the coming crisis that will be bigger than the 2008-2009 crisis because all the investments will soon be obsolete, and this will be very disruptive for the economy.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you show us a lot of possibilities when there will be this major shift in the economical paradigm. But the question is, what will be first? Will it be the crisis, and there will be a real big problem? Or are we on a track and we can do something to make it quicker and to make this paradigm shift quicker and to actually move a bit smoother to this next era, which I believe, I'm an optimist, the same as you, that will be much more positive for the humanity in the whole world than we have it now.
Well, let me share a little anecdote. I've been at Wharton a long time, and for 15 years I taught the Advanced Management Program, which was our 5-week CEO program. We bring in CEOs from all over the world. 15 years was enough. But what I would say on the first day of class to our CEOs from around the world, I want you to go home tonight, first day of class, you're here 5 weeks, and think about your worst nightmare in terms of the crisis around you. Then tomorrow morning, get up and think about how each of those crises is your best opportunity. And I mean that. We are in a crisis. We're in a global economic crisis. We're in a sunset of an industrial era. You can smell it. You don't have to be a PhD to see this. It's not going to change. The whole platform is dysfunctional and the productivity is peaked. That is the crisis. And now we got real-time climate change, which is of a nature beyond anything we've ever experienced. There are huge opportunities. The lucky thing here is we actually have the technology now that can integrate in. That's very fortunate. But what I think we need to understand is that we have to have the story. In Poland and elsewhere, the business community and government and civil society and the next generation, the digital generation, has to see this story. This isn't, as my wife says, what I'm saying isn't rocket science. And what I would say to anyone in this audience, if this isn't the plan to move forward, what is the plan? Step forward and tell me what the alternative is. Stay where we are in the second industrial revolution, or use the digital revolution to bring together communication, energy, and transport, to increase our productivity and efficiencies, to allow us to reduce the ecological footprint by using less of the earth and getting more out of it. That's what efficiency is. And by moving to a sharing economy so that we can produce things and share them over and over again. So we use less of the earth and nothing goes to the landfill. This is common sense. So I think we have no excuse. This narrative is common sense. And from a business point of view, it's everything I mentioned to you today is scaling somewhere. Every single thing I've mentioned. If it can happen in Germany, if little Denmark can do this, if northern industrial France, a mining area, can do this, I'm sure everyone can do this tomorrow morning. I would say bring together everyone that came to this conference. Share the email list. Come together and think about how you can create some kind of a collaboration to begin at the national level and the regional level to begin seeing how we can start laying these maps. And our roadmaps are open source. They're all available to you. And then come and visit these other regions on your own, see what you can learn from them, and see, because you'll have expertise they don't have. It's not that you're behind the learning curve. You've got tremendous expertise. But learn from them. They learn from you. You're going to start cross-bordering with them. This is what you need to do. You need to actually collaborate together and crowdsource this infrastructure revolution by bringing together government at every level, the chambers of commerce. The Euro chambers is part of our coalition because they realize this has to be in every region. That can be done. But you're not going to do it on your own. You got to bring together everyone that's been to this conference and crowdsource. And any way we can help, just email or pick up the phone. Be glad to chat with you and put you in touch with other folks that are doing this. Other industries and startups just like you. Is that a deal? We'll do it.
All right, we have time for one more last question. Better be good. All right, back.
Okay. Stand up or what? Maybe I'll sit. Sorry. Thank you very much for your speech. But yes, you're right. What you are saying, it's quite easy to understand and simple. But there is a difference between to hear someone and to understand what he's saying and to believe what he's saying about. So let me be the pessimist here, and I want to ask you some ifs. What if? What if Donald Trump win in the United States? What if Great Britain decide to leave the European Union? What if the populist parties in whole Europe win their turn? In Great Britain, in France, Marine Le Pen, in Spain, in all Europe, there is a lot of populist parties which are saying that there is that the global warming is a fable. There is a made-up story. They don't believe in it. They want to keep strong, small countries which are operating on the economy that they know. So what you are saying request understanding and understanding of need of change. So what if those all things I said happened?
Well, I think these disruptions are going to happen. And these are the things that some of them are human-inspired disruptions because this change is transformative, and there's a lot of fear. People want to keep in the old ways. You know, all the borders are opening. We're creating a fluid world. We're connecting everybody in real time at very low cost. And this is not going to go away. But then there's all of these backfires. Tribal blood wars and religious wars and political ideological wars going on all over the world in fear. We have to, but the younger generation is there. Everywhere I go, everyone under the age of 35 in that millennial generation, the story I told you today, they all know this story. So demographics is on our side, but there's still real disruptions that could waylay this. The only answer to that, be at the table, organize, come together with other people and show that we actually can create a better future. Because fear in the long run can't reign, because it doesn't provide opportunity for the next generation. But it can be a very powerful disruptor, for sure. In northern France, you mentioned Marine Le Pen. Well, she was the president. She was the nominee of her party, and guess which region she was representing? Northern industrial France, the region we were in. Picardy and Nord-Pas-de-Calais, which then consolidated. Had she won, it may have changed. But what happened was the center-right and the center-left parties came together, and the business community, because we already said we can't go back in time. We've gone into 3 years. We're excited. We're creating jobs. We're creating businesses. We're creating infrastructure, and they won. That's exactly what happened. That was the region, Le Pen's region, that she was running from. Now, maybe even Marie Le Pen will figure out that regardless of everything else, why would you say no to the next economic revolution in history? Why would you say no to the next? But what I'm saying, that's actually what happened in our region. So what I'm saying to you is I'm not naive, and I do understand everything you just said. But there is no alternative but to organize, to come together, to create the new infrastructure, to create the new businesses, to create the new employment, to create the new approach toward how we educate our kids and get the job done. If we wait in fear, we lose time. We got to be motivated and driven to our children's future. I don't think there's any other alternative to that, and I'm not an optimist. As an activist, optimism doesn't do you any good. You just wait around for the good news. And I'm not a pessimist because then you just sit around waiting for the bad news. I consider myself guardedly hopeful, but a realist. We can do better. We're a social creature. We do best when we crowdsource through history. We do best when we come together as communities. We do best when our higher instincts come out, our empathic drive. Now, our basic social ability has to come out. We have to come to the table and make this happen. And I've got to say in ending, Poland should be leading this. You lead Eastern, Central, and Eastern Europe. You're the bridge between that part of Europe, Germany, and Western Europe. Poland should be leading this along with France and Germany and the Netherlands. You absolutely should be at the table. After this conference, organize. Move this forward. I've been there. I was in Poland a few years ago. Your vice premier invited me to come in, was vice premier. I met with the cabinet. That was 4 years ago. It's time. I want to see Poland leading this digital, smart Europe, third industrial revolution forward. I really do. Because that'll bring the rest of Europe in. Tomorrow morning.
I'll let you go with one last question. Very short answer. If Donald Trump wins, which country are you going to move to?
We were out with some close friends the other night. That conversation came up. Well, you know the funny thing about Donald Trump, I'll share this with you. He was 2 classes behind me at the Wharton School back in the 1960s when I was a student. And he always gets up in every press conference and says, he says, I'm not stupid. I went to the Wharton School. That's his come on line. So we're not sure what to do about him. I've been teaching there in the executive program for 20 years. It's a bit tricky. But let me say, he could win. I hope he doesn't win. A new survey came out today that 66% of all women in the country will not vote for him no matter what. 66% of all the women in the country said that there's no way they'll ever vote for him. The young people will not vote for him. The minorities will not vote for him. He has got and the irony of the whole Trump thing, I grew up in a working class community in the south side of Chicago. Union people in the stockyards, the steel mills. And at least back then, working people knew their interest. It's amazing to me that we have a white working class in our country that's voting for this guy, Donald Trump, whose whole life is about exploiting working people for his own advantage. It's sad. What we need to do is we need to bring them in. We need to bring in that older generation of middle and working class who have been very much hurt by the 1% and 99% and what's happened in the last stages of the second industrial revolution. They've been hurt. Bring them in. But demographics is on our side. We need to keep our fingers crossed. But here in Europe, too, yes, the populist right and the far right's there, the far left. What we need to do is bring in the young people. It's their time. It's the digital generation. It's their revolution. All the issues I brought up here should be in the political debate. Everything I raised today, this is the politics of the next 40 years. All the rest, Trump and that's the last politics of the last century. It's clear. If you look at the populist politics of the last century, we got to move ahead. We got to start living in a biosphere world. We got to start seeing ourselves as an indivisible human family. We have to see our fellow creatures as part of that family. We have to begin to take our responsibility for this experiment called life on Earth. We've got to grow up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that note, we want to thank the organizers of Impact, the wonderful team. It's done an amazing job putting this event together. We hope to see you next year. Stay tuned to the dates to be announced and all the details. Thank you very much.